Well, like many of you, my window to the rest of the world these past few months, certainly these past few weeks, has been the screen of my personal computer. Every morning when I wake up every day, I take a peek through that 15-inch window of mine into the world. And I spend some time taking in the news, checking social media. While it's a small world compared to the real world in which we used to spend our lives, and it's been overwhelming at times because of the amount of images and stories and experiences like the ones you just saw here. If you didn't recognize it, the text that was being read over those images was Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, or the Beatitudes. My guess is that you've heard them before, but maybe not against the backdrop of images like those, of people that maybe you identify with, and certainly others you don't. My hope is that the result, the effect of experiencing the Beatitudes in that way, though, is that now there's some cognitive dissonance, some discomfort around what is often a very comfortable text for many of us, a comforting text for many of us, so that you'll hear it anew. I want you to feel that discomfort because that is the way that the people hearing that sermon for the first time would have felt. See, the crowds that gathered to hear Jesus speak that day were not all of one mind. They weren't all of the same background. They were rich and they were poor. They were Jew and they were Roman, religious establishment and run-of-the-mill Hebrew, oppressor and oppressed. These people with wildly different yet interrelated stories heard Jesus speak this sermon. The question is, who do you think they thought Jesus was talking to? Who was it that Jesus was calling blessed, do you think? Jesus doesn't stop the sermon here. He continues to talk after the Beatitudes about how our communities, our neighborhoods are broken and the types of things that break them. How do you think the people felt as he said that? Do you think that Jesus was talking to some of them and not others? Jesus doesn't stop there. He ends this sermon by then teaching them a prayer. We know it as the Lord's Prayer. A prayer that includes phrases, pointed phrases, like forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Who is Jesus talking to? Now suppose Jesus was here today in Burnsville, sitting on the top of Buck Hill, and he gave the exact same sermon for anyone that was able to show up. Who do you think that sermon is for? To put a finer point on it, what was he saying about justice and injustice in our current social moment in our neighborhood? Now, while I'm not in the room with you now, I can understand if you're feeling some intense emotions. That maybe you're identifying with some people in the images and not others. Maybe you're uncomfortable. Well, friends, I think that's the point, and I think there is a reason you feel that way. The reason is that the people that heard this sermon all the way to you and I in this current context, this neighborhood, have been sold a paradigm for justice that isn't big enough for the God that Jesus came to reveal to us. The paradigm of justice that we have been given is the paradigm of retributive justice, and it is too small. Retributive justice, if you haven't heard of it, it asks 3 questions. Number 1, what is the crime? Number 2, who is the offender? Number 3, what is the punishment? Now there's a saying that I'm fond of that goes like this: you often find what you're looking for. It's true here. And I believe that the answers that these 3 questions ask, provide the same answers that we always get, that lock us into the same endless conversations about race and injustice over and over again. Retributive justice, friends, is only able to solve the symptoms of a problem. It's like this. Imagine a large river with a high waterfall. And at the bottom of this waterfall are hundreds of people working frantically, trying to save those who have fallen into the water and have fallen down the waterfall. Now, many of them are drowning. This is serious stuff. Well, as the people along the shore are trying to rescue as many people, one individual looks up, and he sees a seemingly never-ending stream of people falling down the waterfall and begins to run upstream. Well, one of the other rescuers notices and hollers to him, "Where are you going? There's so many people here that need help." To which the man replies, "I'm going upstream to find out why so many people are falling into the river." Retributive justice is a downstream solution to an upstream problem. The vision for the world that Jesus was sketching out in this Sermon on the Mount, the Lord's Prayer, and certainly in the rest of the Gospels, is a vision that jumps the curve of retributive justice to offer something different, something called restorative justice. Now, what does restorative justice look like? How does it work? Restorative justice also has three main tasks, but they're different. They are: 1, find the harm; 2, include the stakeholders; and 3, reintegrate the community. Let's find the harm. Now, Beatitudes are so specific. Jesus speaks into the hurt and the pain that a multitude of people are feeling in specific ways, pain that we feel today. And while it might feel right to say that Jesus was just espousing some ancient version of all lives matter, we may be missing the point. Jesus' vision for the world was provocative precisely because it was able to say with complete truth and capacity that Samaritan lives matter, children's lives matter, Gentile lives matter, Jewish lives matter, women's lives matter, Romans' lives matter, lepers' lives matter. And I think as his followers, we are being challenged today to look into the world, to see all the harm that events like George Floyd's murder manifest among us. Jesus is challenging us to ask how the victims are harmed, all of them, how the oppressors are harmed. To consider the reality that there is an even deeper brokenness in all of us that needs to be addressed in our hearts. And I know that it's hard because our media and our culture, wrapped up in retributive justice as it is, drunk on retributive justice as it is, presses us to look for the crime, the criminal, and the punishment. Dealing with the pressure of our culture in the face of such daunting moments such as this with only that tool in our toolbox is overwhelming. And so I want to give you a first step to begin moving forward in your work towards justice. It's hard work. Friends, when you feel pulled to this way of thinking, to compressing complex situations, stories, and humans into thin stories, pray. What did Jesus do when things got difficult? He prayed. Pray that God will grant you eyes to see, ears to hear as God hears, so that you can empathize, listen, and connect with those who have been harmed, no matter who they are. The second task of restorative justice is to involve all the stakeholders. Another unhealthy thing about the way retributive justice works in our society, especially in the criminal justice system, is that there are prescribed people who are involved in the solving of that justice problem and no one else. In the criminal justice system, it is even rare that an offender meets a victim after the crime, because their crime is understood by that system to be a crime against the state, not the victim. And so often the victim is never able to find clarity, closure. Why did you do this? And the offender is unable to learn or gain empathy. How did that hurt you? In the images that you saw earlier, we found that there are hundreds, thousands, millions of people involved in the harm caused by George Floyd's murder. This event happened to a man in a family, on streets, in a neighborhood, in a community, by an agency, in a city, in a state, in a country. There are more people involved in this question of justice than retributive justice wants us to acknowledge. Jesus spoke to mixed groups of people because the problems that face humanity are all of humanity's problems to solve. Then and now we are in this together. And so as you work for restorative justice in the days ahead, a simple shift in the way that you think can help you to reclaim your calling as a stakeholder. A stakeholder in the unfolding story of justice for George Floyd and for all people with black and brown skin. It's this. When you're led into temptation to other people, that is to set them apart from your group, your moral, your ethical, your resource responsibility, remind yourself that the Jesus that you follow so loved the world that he gave his life. Jesus didn't pick and choose whom he came to save. Our Lord's life, his love, his forgiveness was for all people. And as his followers, we should take up our cross and follow his example. The final task of restorative justice is to reintegrate the community. When all we can appeal to is retributive justice, we face a catastrophic limit in the type of resources we need to solve the big problems facing our communities that keep them fractured. We face a lack in money because we have to rely on the budget of a criminal justice system and underfunded social agencies. We face a lack in perspective because we don't involve all of the stakeholders, the neighborhood, the community. We face a lack in wisdom because often retributive justice just gives us what we were looking for. And we feel that we already know what we need to know about the world's problems. The process stops. We face a lack of hope because we know somehow that the system in which we are working in can't get us what we desire. And oftentimes these deficiencies lead us to believe that reintegrating communities, fixing neighborhoods is at best impossible, at worst foolish. What's important to keep in mind when we think about what it was that Jesus was revealing to people, God's justice, restorative justice, is that when it comes to resources, the ones I just mentioned and all of the others, God doesn't run out. And so while we may think that it is impossible for communities that have been harmed by violence to ever be repaired, to God it is possible. And our job, friends, is to work like it's true. To stand with the poor in spirit like it is true. To comfort those who are mourning like it is true. To feed the hungry and give drink to the thirsty like it is true. Work with the merciful, the pure in heart, the peacemakers, like it is true. It is to pray the prayer that God gave us and to believe that one day that God's kingdom will come on earth as it is in heaven. But to make this leap, we have to continue to dream. We have to continue to dream like Jesus and the other people that caught his vision, like Dr. King, to pray in the way that Jesus taught us to pray until it is true. To walk by faith until it is true. Jesus' original audience was uncomfortable in the presence of this sermon, not because it was impossible, but because it was true. We, too, are uncomfortable in the presence of this text because it is not impossible, but because it is true. It is challenging. And so every morning when we peek out of our personal computers, our 15-inch windows out into the world, rather than letting our discomfort there turn us away from the hard work of seeing the world like Jesus does, away from the hard work of letting God change our hearts, may we let God break open our paradigm for justice to something bigger, to something holy, to something that's restorative.